The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Good afternoon, or should I say aloha. This is Melanie Young and David Ransom, the hosts of the Connected Table Live. And this week, we want to wish all of our listeners a Happy New Year. We hope everybody is celebrating and enjoying, looking forward to 2015. We are giving you a special broadcast from the Valley Isle of Maui, where we celebrated our own New Year's. It's also sometimes called, in some of the regions, Land of the Love-Snatching Wind. David and I have been driving all around the island, exploring and tasting and savoring the Hawaiian experience. And today we have two guests who have been influenced by Hawaii. Briefly, I will let David do the intros, but first will be Julie Reiner, who is one of the top mixologists in the United States and world, who grew up in Hawaii. And the second will be Chef Philippe Chen, who I met, who was working on the East Coast and now owns a restaurant called Sugarcane Maui in Maui, which we had the pleasure of dining at last night. So we are delighted to bring you Hawaii. Back behind us is the ocean and the sun, and we're spreading warmth today. I'll let David introduce our first guest.
Well, thanks, Melanie, and Happy New Year to everybody, of course. And we're thrilled to be broadcasting live from the beautiful Valley Isle today. And I want to introduce our first guest, Julie Reiner, who's an old friend of ours, definitely an old friend of mine, and we've had the pleasure of working together on numerous occasions and chatting together and raising a glass together, of course. Julie's one of the great mixologists in the U.S. and one of the real trendsetters in the world of cocktails and mixology. Not really even in the U.S. anymore, but I think her reach is really almost global at this point.
Yes.
She's been so influential in really kind of creating what has become known as the cocktail movement. And Julie, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, David and Melanie. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here and to kind of kick off our new year 2015 with a show from Hawaii, and actually having somebody on the show who grew up in Hawaii. You grew up here, and it's been a big influence in your life, obviously. And we'd love to kind of chat with you about, where you come from and what Hawaii means to you, and then also what it's done to kind of help influence your direction in life, especially in the world of cocktails.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about, first let me tell everybody that Julie's cocktail bars are based in New York, and they're some of the most famous cocktail bars really in the country. The first is Flatiron Lounge, which she opened in 2003, which was a huge trend-setting cocktail bar in New York. Still is, 12 years later, going strong. And then she also opened Pegu Club in 2005, which she co-worked with Audrey Saunders for a long time, and I believe you're still a co-owner of that, Julie.
Yes, that is true.
And then her third is Clover Club, which is based in Brooklyn. She jumped across the East River and went to Brooklyn for this one, and it is one of the hot, most influential cocktail bars in the country at this point. It is just doing so well, and I know you focus a lot of your time on Clover Club these days, but it's such a great educational tool also for the bartenders that go through it, because you really are hands-on it in a lot of ways for a long time. So tell us a little bit about kind of your philosophy and really what got you started in the cocktail business as well.
Well, I grew up on Oahu, which is one of the sister islands to where you guys are at right now.
Yeah.
I was always just surrounded by fresh fruit and ingredients. I had a mango tree in my backyard and a lychee tree in the front yard. And so I was, really into tropical flavors and eating very fresh growing up there. and I went to college. I left the island. I lived in San Francisco, and then, kind of started bartending early on in college. And when I got to New York City at around like 1996, 97, I started managing a little lounge in the West Village. And, I was kind of just trying to entertain myself and talking to the chef about flavor pairings and because I wasn't a trained chef, so to speak, but I wanted to create cocktails that were fresh juice, and I wanted to create my own infusions and syrups. And at that time in New York, nobody was really doing that. So I found myself, immediately on the front page of the food section of the New York Times.
I remember the restaurant was C3, which was right off of Washington Square Park, right?
Right, exactly.
And it was a great little restaurant. My family actually used to sell wine to that restaurant back when we had our winery in upstate New York, and so I knew it from that way. But you actually became really a very well-known mixologist through working there and kind of starting off there, because as you said, nobody was doing what you were doing at that point, and then you kind of got noticed. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the owner of C3 was very much into wine, and they had a beautiful wine list. And she also had a lot of really interesting spirits on the back bar and things that I didn't see in most of the bars I had worked at. She, at that time having mezcal on the back bar and eau de vie and things like that, you didn't really see so much. But because of her interest in wine and sort of rare and interesting spirits, she had collected all of these things. And so I was able to start mixing with those and really pushing the boundaries that I had previously known and create some really interesting drinks. Dale DeGroff was, still doing, he was at the Rainbow Room, and he had opened Blackbird, and he was doing that sort of fresh ingredient cocktails, but not very many other people were. So I realized very quickly that this was an untapped market, and that I really wanted to open a bar that focused solely on really high-end sort of gourmet cocktails. And that was how Flatiron Lounge was born.
And that was born in 2003, and it really kind of quickly became a real trendsetter in New York. All of a sudden, from alumni that used to work for you, et cetera, little bars started popping up kind of in that genre as well around the city. But Flatiron Lounge really was kind of the one that I think started it all.
It really was. The first, the only thing that was open when we opened Flatiron in the, as far as the cocktail world goes, was Milk and Honey, but nobody really knew that it existed.
Well, you had to find it, first of all. I mean, I remember going there with a journalist, and we snuck in because I know that the owner, Sasha, didn't like to have journalists in, and we got caught. And he came over and he said, "I noticed you've been taking notes under the table. Are you a journalist?" And I was just cringing.
That is so funny. And
I was like, I'm just a guest. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Dale was doing some amazing things at Rainbow Room, and he really was the forefront. But it's amazing how, I always like to look at the cocktail movement, kind of where the chef American culinary movement was in the 1980s, where suddenly everybody was focusing on fresh. And then flash forward, it kind of transformed itself into the cocktail movement. And finally, people were stopped using mixes and artificial. And now it's merged beautifully with culinary. So you've got, and like the wine world too, you've got cocktails being paired with different menu items, which is really beautiful.
Absolutely. And also, things like wine-based aperitifs and sherries, ports, those sort of things being utilized in cocktails that make them more food-friendly as well.
What's also interesting is the regionality of spirits now that's growing up. David and I, at your suggestion, visited a local distillery yesterday, Ocean Vodka, and learned a lot about how it's being made here.
Yeah, I consulted on a program in Maui about a year ago, and we ended up taking a little sort of group trip up there to see the distillery, and they're doing some amazing things. And the water that they're using, comes off of like the deep ocean off of the Big Island. And it's just a really interesting spirits that they're creating there.
Yeah, the most expensive water in the world, $20 a bottle.
It's delicious.
It is.
Delicious.
It's purchased by the Japanese. We learned a lot about that. And we also learned about all the sugar cane that they're using to create their rum.
I want to backtrack a little bit and tell everybody that what we're talking about, since we forgot to mention it, is Ocean Vodka, which is a new organic certified vodka made from sugarcane grown at the farm on Maui. And they've also just started a rum agricole, a sugarcane pressed juice based rum, which is only on Maui now, but Ocean Vodka is actually in 30 states now. So they've actually got a pretty good distribution with that. But it's made with seawater that is then desalinated and it's pulled out of, I think, Julie, was it something like 3,000 feet below sea level off the coast of Kona? They pull it out of the water. And Kona is the west coast of the Big Island of Hawaii. And they pull it out of the water and they desalinate it. But it's a very soft water because it still retains all the minerals and nutrients. So they're really literally only taking the salt out of it. And it really created a very interesting vodka, in my opinion.
It did. The mouthfeel to it was the most captivating thing about it to me. And, most people know that I don't tend to mix with vodkas all that often. So for me to be impressed by a vodka is usually, it's a big deal.
Well, I agree with you. Vodka is obviously used a lot, but it's not something that a lot of mixologists play with on a regular basis because it doesn't have a flavor profile that really adds something to the drink. Yeah. So, but this, I'm with you on this because I thought the water added a certain mouthfeel to it, a softness, a richness to it that you don't get in other vodkas. So I thought it was very interesting, even just for that reason, and kind of worth watching, I think, as it grows as a brand.
Absolutely, we put it into quite a few drinks at the Andaz Wailea. Your consulting gig was at the Andaz, which is in Wailea, which is on the south coast of Maui. Tell us a little bit how you got involved with that and what your role was there.
And do you have any more consulting projects coming up like that?
Well, the Andaz Wailea, I was contacted by Michael Stevens, who's the general manager of the hotel. And he was really interested in making sure that the hotel we had people who understood the islands and understood the people and could really give it a very authentic sort of feel. And me being somebody who grew up there, but who has a career in the cocktail industry in New York, I was at the top of their list to speak to. And of course, for me, I wanted to absolutely go and live in Maui for a while and put in this program. So
why not?
They didn't have to twist my arm too hard.
Right.
But yeah, it was my suggestion that I go there for nearly 2 months to really not only put in a menu, but also to teach the bartenders about cocktail history and cocktail culture and give them a sense of place, in this whole crazy cocktail world. I installed a back of the house system for them for juicing and for making house-made syrups so that it would be consistent and the barbacks would have great training as well. Because so much of what we do is sort of the back of the house stuff is the most important thing. You can teach a bartender how to make a drink, but if the juice isn't fresh and the syrups aren't made by the same people all the time, there's no consistency. So that was pretty much what I did there. I worked with Robert Pace, who is their bar manager, who's just fantastic. And really, he gave so much to that program and was a big part of why it is successful.
Now, do you have any other projects like that coming up, either in the Hawaiian Islands or elsewhere?
I'm working on some things here in New York City. I'm getting ready to do a program with the new Baccarat Hotel in Midtown. But that is the latest of the consulting jobs that I'm doing. I'll happily do another one in Hawaii if anybody's listening.
Yeah, really. Particularly in the winter.
Particularly, yeah. Can I come out there?
Like right now, because it's 8 degrees in New York.
So you mentioned vodka wasn't your preferred spirit. What are some of the spirits that you find you most enjoy working with? Much like chefs like to work with certain ingredients. What are your favorite ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, spirit-wise, I love rums. I love agricole rums. Whiskey. I'm a huge fan of mixing with, as well as gin. I just like a spirit that's really going to bring something to the table. Vodka to me is like a white piece of paper. So it
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Most of the time without lines or holes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it has uses in that I'll use vodka for infusions when I want to sort of paint it another color, by adding tea to it or something like that. But these spirits that have tequila, that have like intense flavor and also a sense of place where I taste tequila and I'm immediately transported to Mexico and mezcal to Oaxaca. And so I love working with those kind of spirits and things that are going to be a challenge for me to mix with.
We were just saying, driving back from the distillery yesterday, how the spirit always tastes better in the country where it's produced.
That's true.
And how we just want to drink it straight and neat, maybe with a little lime, and how then you go somewhere else and it's just not the same.
Yes.
It's true. But it gives you an understanding of why they make what they make, where they make it,
It truly does, especially if you're working with a plant or something like that, like when you make mezcals and things like that, you're working with the agave plant, and you can only grow it in one place, so it's or a couple of places. So it's obviously, you get that terroir aspect out of certain spirits as well. And I think to a certain extent, you might get that out of whiskey and bourbon and things like that too. One of the things that you're actually well known for, not necessarily to the consumer public, but within the industry itself, is you have a little bit of what I like to call a garnish fetish, and it's not always well received by your staff. So I'd love for you to touch on that a little bit as we chat, because I know, especially to you, the correct garnish is a huge part of your drinks and what you bring to the table or bring to the bar, as it were. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, when I opened Flatiron Lounge, we opened in the summertime, and so we had about 25 garnishes on the bar, and the staff, when they were setting up the bar before we would open, they called it the Julie Reiner Garnish Challenge. In being able to get everything where it needed to be. But my philosophy is really that you drink and eat things with your eyes before you even taste them. So if it looks beautiful and inviting, it's going to taste that much better. Of course, there are garnishes that are supposed to be on a specific drink, and there are garnishes that shouldn't be on a drink, So the garnish certainly has to somehow speak to what is inside the glass. You're not going to put a strawberry on a drink that has nothing to do with strawberries in the drink. So yeah, that's really it. And I like to have interesting looking things, something that goes through the room and people are like, wow, what is that? I need to have that just by the visual.
Well, I know that what comes to mind for me was you had a bar in Lower Manhattan for a little while called Lanikai, and it was very tropically based drinks, et cetera. Lanikai is obviously a Polynesian term, so but it was very tropical. And the garnishes, you had things like flowers, and you had obviously pineapple leaves and things like that were all going through your drinks. And it was really the most beautiful presentation. And I think that is one of the things that comes to mind when people think of a tropical drink is color and the visual like that, and beautiful things like flowers and stuff.
Yeah, that really, and a lot of that definitely comes from growing up in Hawaii as well. And Lanikai is actually a beach on Oahu that is one of my favorite places to go. And that bar really was sort of, my sort of homage to Hawaii. And I had multiple types of flowers. I had lemongrass stalks. I had, cinnamon sticks and all sorts of different garnishes. We did grilled pineapple as a garnish. You name it, we've tried it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite garnish that you keep going back to?
Well, this time of year I'm drinking old fashioned, so it's lemon and orange twist for me right now.
There you have it.
I mean, it's funny because you look at my bars in the summer, our spring-summer menu, we have 25 garnishes on the bar, and then fall and winter, it's not as much about the fresh fruit because there just isn't as much. So we're working a lot with a lot more herbs and spices. So the garnish section kind of shrinks a little bit.
Yeah. What about, I've had some interesting savory garnishes that have intrigued me, like the pickling and the fermented. Are you doing a lot with that?
We've done some different pickled vegetables on our brunch drinks, some of the Bloody Mary variations that we do at Clover Club. But yeah, I mean, we do quite a few different savory drinks. One of the most popular was created by Tom Macy, who's my partner and head bartender over at Clover Club, that has thyme and peas, sugar snap peas to it. Sounds crazy, but it is delicious.
Kind of sounds good, actually.
It is so good. It's gin with dry vermouth and fresh lemon juice, and you muddled thyme and peas. And it sounds crazy, but it's so delicious. And it's been probably one of the most written about drinks out of Clover Club. So yeah, savory drinks are great. And we're always trying out different things. Celery juice, that's another one. We had a drink with tequila and celery that was fantastic.
I think celery is actually starting to creep into drinks a little bit more. I've been noticing it in some of the drinks that I've had lately as well. So it's or celery seed at least, something like that. It's that essence.
Yeah, we were actually juicing celery because it's pretty much all juice.
Yeah, pretty much. Juice and fiber.
Goes very well with tequila.
Yes. Well, I can't wait to come. Well, we're going to have to, Melanie will have to stop in Clover Club when we get back home and try a couple of these wonderful drinks. Tell us a little bit about how Clover Club came about.
Yeah, well, I had been living in Manhattan. I lived right between Flatiron and Pegu. And so I was the first one called for any emergency that possibly could happen. And there just came a point where I wanted more space. And I moved out to Park Slope with my partner, Susan. And, we were thinking about starting a family. And I got out here and I realized that there were just some things that were missing from the food and beverage world in Brooklyn at the time. And this was 7 or 8 years ago that we moved. And so I started talking about wanting to do a bar in Brooklyn. I spoke to David Wondrich, who's, as you know, a very famous drinks writer and author. And he lives very close to Smith Street in Carroll Gardens, where we opened Clover Club. And I spoke to him about locations, and I just wanted to do something that was sort of, taking into account the atmosphere and putting some money into interior and creating a space that people would want to come and spend a good amount of time in. And also really great cocktails, because it kind of was lacking out here at that time.
Yeah, I think it was. There was very little out there. I think it was you and maybe 1 or 2 other bars, and that was about it at that time. There's some more now, obviously. But I think Clover Club has really become kind of a go-to place for mixologists when they come to New York City. It's like, we got to go to Clover Club at least once while we're in town, things like that. So it's really kind of hit a great chord, I think, within the industry in New York. It's really become quite.
I mean, ultimately, it's great because it is a neighborhood bar. We're here for the neighborhood, and we have a huge following of people who live right there. But at the same time, we get all of those industry people. We get people from Manhattan coming out to Brooklyn on the weekends to come to Clover Club. And we've also been getting a lot of European tourists who are really fascinated with Brooklyn all of a sudden.
Oh, no kidding. We used to live in Union Square, and it was like everybody would go, "Where's Brooklyn? How do I get to Brooklyn?" Many years ago, it was like, "Why are we going to Brooklyn?" And now everybody's going to Brooklyn. information. It's amazing. And, your bar, Clover Club, is much like with chefs, you do the grand tour when you want to learn from the masters. Yours is definitely a stop on the grand tour of bartending world now.
That's true.
And everyone who works in the industry must go there and check it out. And, of course, everyone who follows the industry and enjoys having the best also check it out, which is a testament to your work.
Oh, thank you, Melanie.
Yeah. So we have maybe like two or three minutes left before our next guest. First of all, we want to just share with you, we learned a word yesterday. I hope we pronounced it right. Pauhana.
Oh, yes.
That means cocktail in Hawaiian.
Pauhana. It's sort of, it's like, the end of the day, you have a pauhana drink.
Yeah. So what is your favorite pauhana when you get off work? Or is it beer like all the chefs?
It depends on where I'm at. It's definitely not beer. I drink a lot of Negronis. It also kind of depends on the season. When I'm in Hawaii, I'll drink Mai Tais, daiquiris, and Queen's Park Swizzles, which if you haven't been to Lehua Lounge, you should go there because I put one of those on the menu.
We'll have to go check it out. Is that at the Andaz?
Yes. Yeah. And here in New York, this time of year, it's old fashions and Manhattans most of the time.
Well, you're a confessed bourbon fan. I know that. So I know whiskey's a big thing for you.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, we want to thank you for being on the show today. Tell everyone listening how they can follow you.
Sure. Yeah. On Twitter, I am at Mixtress NYC. You can follow me there. As well as also on Instagram, Mixtress NYC.
So we enjoy having the Mixtress of Mixology on, and we will see you back in New York.
Yes, have a great
hopefully
time.
sometime in more aloha here too.
Enjoy. I want some photos.
For those listening who haven't been to Clover Club, Flatiron Lounge, or Pegu Club yet, you got to go to at least one of those things, one of those places, and check it out because the drinks are extraordinary. They always have been, and Julie's really one of the great mixologists in the country. So, Julie, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.
Great.
Mahalo. You're listening to The Connected Table Live with Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. Each week we bring the most dynamic people who work front and center and behind the scenes in the world of food, fine beverage, and hospitality. Next week, David will be broadcasting from the San Antonio Cocktail Conference, and I will be broadcasting from probably the Delta Club Lounge. So he will be bringing you some very exciting guests from this fairly new conference that is making some headways in the United States.
Well, speaking of Sasha Petrosky, it was actually founded by Sasha.
Exactly.
Who we talked a little bit about earlier, Milk and Honey in New York. And so hopefully we're going to have him on the show. We're still trying to confirm that, but it's a pretty young cocktail conference at this point. I think this is the third incarnation, the third year of it. But they're doing great things, and it's styled after the Great Tales of the Cocktail Conference as well. So it's kind of in that mode. So it's industry focused, but it's but they're doing some great stuff there. So I'm looking forward to broadcasting from San Antonio next Wednesday live, and then doing some follow-up interviews as well that will be taped and then aired later.
So that will be Texas, but again, you're listening to the Aloha edition of the Connected Table Live from Maui. And our next guest is a chef and restaurateur who I knew back when he was making headways in Philadelphia with restaurants that were getting national acclaim. He is now in Maui, and we had the pleasure of eating at Sugarcane Maui last night, his restaurant. James Beard award-winning French master chef Philippe is one of the early pioneers of fusion cooking. He refined his skills in some of the world's best restaurants. He's actually cooked for President Barack Obama. He's Parisian-born. He was the youngest maître cuisinier ever, and some of his restaurants in in Philadelphia were, he had Philippe Chin, he had Chanterelle, and he worked at the Rittenhouse Hotel. I was surprised to learn he was in Maui. We actually connected through Facebook. I want to welcome you, Philippe, and have you share your story about what brought you from the East Coast to Maui. Welcome.
Aloha.
Yes,
Aloha,
aloha
Philippe. Welcome
and
to the
mahalo. We had a wonderful meal last night
Thank
your
you.
restaurant. Yeah, it was beautiful. And what is beautiful about it is that all your classic French training, which you do so well, melds beautifully with local ingredients that you find here in Hawaii, and particularly the fish and the vegetables and the fruits. It was just incredible.
Yeah, we're so lucky on Maui to have such a great array of things that we can play with. I mean, from, stuff from the wild that we pick ourselves, actually, and then from, different farmers that work so hard for us, and we got really beautiful vegetables and fruit, like you say. What about that bitter orange with the tuna last night? That's something that you won't find anywhere else. It's a tiny little orange found up in Kura, and it's so delicious. So it's a great pleasure to have those ingredients available to us on a daily basis, basically, and it's always a surprise what we can, come up with, and it's great. I mean.
Well, I want to backtrack a little bit and just give a little history. You're born and raised in France. Your mother is French. Your father was Chinese. That obviously influenced, it was a melting pot household. You received classical training at the L'École Hôtelière de Paris, and you worked in many of the great French restaurants to hone your skills. Then you went to the Caribbean to work at a 5-star restaurant, and then to the East Coast. Now, when I met you, you were really making all the headlines and getting all the top awards, from a James Beard Awards to Dorona in Philadelphia. Talk to us about your journey from Philadelphia to Maui, how you ended up here and what happened along the way, because it's actually quite interesting.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, coming from the East Coast, and 90% of people here on Maui, you ask them where they're from, 90%, I would say 90% are from the West Coast. It's very unusual to find somebody that moved from New York or from Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. However, when you talk back in the days, which I'm not going to say how long it is because it doesn't make me feel good, but it is a while back. Back in the days, I had the great pleasure to become very good friend with Sam Choi. Sam and I met during the Book and the Cook in Philadelphia, which is a great event that still takes place today, where they match a restaurant with a cookbook offer. Mm-hmm. And I had the pleasure to meet Sam, and we start talking. And as you say earlier, I was tagged as a pioneer of the fusion cooking back in those days, and I think that really comes from from my household, come from my parents. The Sunday dinner at home was maybe we start with pâté and saucisson, and then for main course we have four. So really a melting pot, and I think that really shown in my cuisine. And again, when I first opened Chanterelle, which was my first restaurant as a chef owner, I was opening a French restaurant. But, the name is French, the cuisine was French, the cuisine was French techniques. However, without even noticing it myself, I start using a lot of the Asian spice. Sesame seeds, sesame oil, ginger and yuzu and all that stuff. And I start using that with, instead of doing a classic lemon chicken, for example, I would use yuzu juice and make a yuzu chicken, which, and back then it was not known. And all of a sudden, I was tagged as, a French Asian restaurant, a French fusion restaurant, which was funny, but in a way, true. So to make a long story short, been in Philadelphia after that, meet Sam. Sam brought me to do a few events in Honolulu. Then he brought me to do a guest chef appearance at his restaurant back then in Honolulu. Then he brought me to Kona. And then I was invited to compete in the National Poke Contest.
Oh, the Poke Contest. Not to be confused with the Hokey Pokey Contest. And how did you do? I think we may have lost Philippe. Have we lost Philippe? Chef Chin?
think so for now, but we can certainly talk about his restaurant and talk about his career a little bit as well without him while he calls back.
Well, why don't we talk about what we had last night? Because he'll be calling back to talk about his career. And again, this restaurant, Sugar Cane Maui, is located on Front Street in the town of Lahaina, which is not too far from where we're staying in Kaanapali Beach. It blends, I think Chef Chin has been there about a year and a half. He's chef owner. It blends his French classical training with infusion upbringing, Parisian mom, Chinese dad, with very regional ingredients. And I think we have him back. Chef?
Yeah, I think we had a little Maui technical problem.
Well, it's island time. We were just briefly about to talk about what we had last night at your restaurant. But before we do that, let's go back. You were talking about how you'd entered the poke contest, and I said that's better than the hokey pokey contest. And how did you do?
And I did very well. I won the national poke contest here in the United States.
You're the poke champ.
Yes. And actually, this menu item is still on my menu because what makes it very different in the eyes of the judges, and of course in the eyes of Sam, is that I incorporated a very Hawaiian-owned ingredient, which is opia. And opia is basically a coconut pudding or coconut jello. So I actually serve my poke with little dice of coconut gel, and it makes it different and sweet, and it's fun.
Well, poke, for those listening, is really one of the classic Hawaiian dishes. How would you describe it for someone who may not be familiar with it?
Well, poke, basically, it's the respect of the ingredient. Again, a traditional poke, it's only 3 ingredients, if you think about it. Well, it's a little more than that, but 3 main ingredients, which is ai tuna, which is, obviously right in the backyard, right from the water here. The fish is fabulous, as you can tell, as you know, as you experience since you've been here. Mm-hmm. So ai tuna that is diced raw, usually a sweet onion, usually a Maui onion, and ogo, which is a seaweed that only grows in the island of Hawaii. And that's the main ingredient of a true poke. And then, of course, shoyu, a soy sauce, as we know in the mainland. And that's a true poke. And over the years, poke have been, there's an evolution on poke, and now we start seeing poke on the mainland, actually. But basically, it's the Hawaiian tuna tartare. That's what I would call it. It's raw tuna, super fresh, mixed with different ingredients and different sauces. Mine is, like I said, it's with opia. It's with, I make a kimchi dressing, which is made from pickled ginger juice.
So it's really, as you say, like a tuna tartare, and it is but it can really be a whole different slew of ingredients as long as it kind of follows the same theme. So the variations can be one or the same as long as you're making it kind of in that style. So it's, as you say, like a tartare, steak tartare, tuna tartare, whatever it may be.
And I think we are waiting for Philippe Chin. Again, we're on island time, and sometimes technology doesn't always work. While we're waiting for him to get back, I'm holding here the Honolulu Star Advertiser that talks about the 2015 Hawaiian food trends. And one of them is ulu, which is breadfruit, which hasn't been one of our personal favorite items in the world to eat, but we tried the most phenomenal ulu macadamia nut hummus made here locally that just knocked our socks off. And apparently ulu is so popular in Hawaii that they're actually having a shortage of ulu. And they need to make more demand, and they have planted more trees, but it's something that almost every Hawaiian eats. The other is eland, E-L-A-N-D. Are you back, Chef?
I'm back. I don't know what's going on.
Well, what we were doing while we were waiting for you is we had picked up the Honolulu Star Advertiser, and it talked about the top food trends. And while we have that, just briefly, ulu was one, breadfruit, which I was saying wasn't our personal favorite, but we just had we told you, breadfruit hummus with macadamia nuts. Eland. Eland is, how would you describe eland, E-L-A-N-D?
Well, it's one of the African antelopes.
Well, I was going to have actually Chef Chin say what it is from a Hawaiian standpoint.
Well, it's a game. I didn't really experience with it yet, but I did hear that it is something that is the next trend, which I love to try to find locally. Obviously, I'm looking to find it locally and try to play with it.
What is your favorite protein to work with, aside from fish, which we talked about, because you had some beautiful pork on your menu and a ribeye, which David had?
Right. I work with a Hawaiian rancher, which is it's a cooperative based on Kauai, and that basically use different local beef farmer and bring everything together to the same slaughterhouse. So they based out of they take farms from different beef farmers from Kauai, from the Big Island. And then they all bring them back together as one label that's called Hawaiian Rancher. And they really do a nice job. It's I would say 90% grass-fed. What happened is that they actually finished the last week on grain because the problem is that we don't have enough, not enough grass to get them to the right size. But basically it's a 90% grass-fed animal. It's really lean, it's really delicious. And I use that, anywhere from my burger to my ribeye.
Well, I had the ribeye last night, and it was a beautiful piece of meat. It was lean, it was flavorful, it was delicious. It was, of course, beautifully cooked. And I can see why you'd want to use it. It was really a wonderful piece of meat. I find some of the things on your menu very, very interesting, Chef Philippe. One of the most interesting, I think, we had last night was your Brussels sprouts. And it's not a dish that you would typically associate with Polynesian cooking or Hawaiian food or even having on Hawaii most of the time. But it was really just a fabulous dish. It's got a brown butter and vanilla flavoring sauce to it, and it was really just wonderful to try. Tell us a little bit about the impetus and what made you come up with that, because it was really fabulous.
Yeah, the whole inspiration came actually with the product that I'm using. That it's a local product. It's called Moi Preserve, and they actually make 100% vanilla bean powder. And it's absolutely delicious, very expensive but delicious. So I say, what do I make? What's great in Hawaii, we have Hawaiian sea salt. Hawaiian sea salt is so delicious. And then vanilla powder mixed together, and you sprinkle that on Brussels sprout, and it's like, wow, I just changed the Brussels sprout, And have you seen the classic burnt butter Brussels sprout that I love, that I grew up with? So again, it's part of that fusion, using the local ingredient and the local flavor to take something that, I grew up back in the days in France. Obviously, Brussels is not far from Paris. And we eat a lot of Brussels sprouts. And, Brussels sprouts is something I grew up with, but it was, interesting to put a twist to it. And that vanilla powder really made it something different. I mean, I think it makes the dish. You won't believe how many people buy the Brussels sprout and how many people come back for the Brussels sprouts. They're absolutely delicious.
Well, it's interesting because you go on TripAdvisor and there's Brussels sprouts mentioned in a lot of the reviews that you're getting, and so obviously what you're doing with the Brussels sprouts is pretty good.
Well, and if I can say something funny, in the restaurant business, we try to take care of the staff, and we have a staff meal program where they can buy anything from the menu at a very, very low price. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised how many of my staff members that get the Brussels sprouts. And you would think that they would get a steak, they would get a burger. But no, they say, I'm going to have the edamame truffle pot sticker and the Brussels sprouts for dinner. Which, to me, that makes me happy, because those are dishes that are different, and it makes them a better server or a better cook, because they taste it, they see what it's all about,
Yeah, it's true. You know what? Speaking of Brussels sprouts, I just want to touch on because Hawaii, and particularly Maui, has an abundance of farms that produce these incredibly local greens. Particularly, we were up near Kula, near Haleakala, and we love the Kula Farm Stand. You have a beautiful selection of salads, incorporating a lot of local produce, including something called the Paholi fern, which I'd never heard of. We were asking what it is. It's a fern. What are some of your favorite fresh vegetables, produce that you like to use that are native to Hawaii?
Well, obviously the Paholi fern, I'm a big, big fan. I've always been, actually, because what is Paholi fern? It's really a cousin of the fiddle elf fern that you know in the East Coast that only grow for a short season.
Yeah, they grow for a very, very short time, and you can rarely find them.
Here in Hawaii, they're about triple the size, and they grow all year long. I'm very lucky to work with some people that own a farm in Hana. It's called Hana Urban Flowers. And they deliver to the restaurant once a week, only once a week. So you got to be careful, and but that's the beauty of it. If I run out of something, I tell the customer, I run out of something because I use fresh produce, and it's not always available. It's not in my freezer. I don't have a freezer. The only freezer I've got is for ice cream, and I will run out of fish because if the fisherman come today with 25 pounds of mai-mai and I've got 200 reservations, I'm going to run out of mai-mai. To me, that's not the end of the world. That's the proof that I'm using a fresh ingredient from a backyard. And running out of mai-mai, it's totally acceptable in my book. Running out of Paholi fern, which I did on New Year's Eve, it's totally acceptable. The farmer didn't deliver on New Year's Eve. It was an holiday. They delivered not on New Year's Eve, on New Year's Day. They didn't deliver on New Year's Day. They delivered the day after. So on New Year's Day, I have no Paholi fern, and that's fine with me. That is what it should be. If the product is not right or if the product is not available, I don't serve it.
Well, and people who come to your restaurant should understand that too, that because it's fresh and because it's just picked or just fished or caught, it's not always there in abundance. What do you miss from the mainland that you can't get here?
To be honest with you, not really much. I mean, I'm at the point, it's only been a year and a half and I'm still discovering new ingredients. I've always been a fan of discovering new ingredients, even in the mainland, when we had the whole big, the whole movement with the serving venison and all those new available ingredients. So, and you do have availability to a lot of things here. You do have to have passion. It's island time. If you want, let's say, foie gras, A-grade, you better be willing to wait eight weeks to get it, but you would get it. It's just a matter of adjusting to the time frame of the island, but you can really get everything you want. And again, my motto is really, why would I wait 6 weeks to have foie gras when I can use something more local and something just as delicious?
Exactly.
Well, I think that's one of the beauties about being able to cook out here is the fact that everything is so fresh and there's so much grown locally. You're really never at a loss of being able to come up with something new and interesting.
No, like you mentioned, like I told you yesterday, I've got a few spots where I go, I know where to find my yuzu lime. I've got a yuzu lime tree in the middle of the jungle, and it's only 5 miles from where I live.
Yeah.
And it's on the side of the road. It's a beautiful giant yuzu tree, and I go there and I pick very carefully the yuzu, and I cut some leaves, and it's great. And then obviously you got the farmers that help you, and the cooperative that help you to bring it to your door. From the fresh taro leaf. I've got taro leaf that came the other morning. They were full of dew. It was so beautiful opening that wooden box, and the leaves were giant, beautiful taro leaf, and they were misted with the morning dew on them.
Oh, it just sounds divine.
That's something you like, wow, I'm in Hawaii, it's something that is breathtaking. It's, the guy that show up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in your back door with a 5 mai-mai that are just out the water. Believe it or not, when those mai-mai come in, we have to hang them by the tail for a couple of days because they're too fresh to cut.
Well, that's one of the beauties of Maui and all of Hawaii is it's not, extreme seasons. So you have fresh produce, an abundance of fish from the ocean, cattle ranch all year round. And like we had Julie Reiner on earlier, and she was lamenting it's harder to have exciting garnishes in the winter because she's also based on seasonality. So
Right.
that's one of the true blessings about living and working out here. And we were really glad to connect with you out here. We only have about a minute left. Before we go, we want to make sure everybody has your Twitter and website, which is Sugarcane Maui.
www.sugarcanemaui.com is a website. Twitter is @sugarcanemaui, @sugarcanemaui, and Facebook is Sugarcane Maui.
And the phone number is 808-214-6662. What's nice is if you get there early, you can see a beautiful sunset as well. Chef, it's been a pleasure to visit with you. We want to thank you for your time this morning and for a beautiful dinner last night. And we wish you aloha and mahalo.
Mahalos to you, mahalo nui. Have a safe trip back to the mainland, and I'm sure we see each other and talk to each other via great social media.
Well,
Absolutely.
we look forward to it, Chef, and thanks so much for taking time with us today.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Melanie.
Fantastic.
Mahalo.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
This is the Connected Table Live from Maui. As I said, next week, David will be in San Antonio for the cocktail conference. And each week, please visit with us and share us at Connected Table on Twitter, Facebook, The Connected Table, and www.theconnectedtable.com. Signing off, we hope you have a delicious week, and we'll connect with you next week.